Hi everyone, Leah here from EurekaCrystalBeads.com with another fun beading video for you. Before I get started, just a quick reminder to go check out the rest of our channel, and if you like what you see, hit the subscribe button and notification bell and you'll always know when we're posting new content. Today's project is a really great technique called filled netting. Now this is something that has been around for a very long time. There's numerous videos on it, but I'm going to give you my take with my design. And my design is utilizing really great cost-effective 6mm Druks mixed with 6mm Swarovski bicones. And the way I laid them out, the Swarovski bicones swirl around the design. So I'm going to show you how to accomplish that. So let's go over the rest of the items that you're going to need. You're going to need a size 11 seed bead and a size 15 seed bead. You're going to need 6mm beads. Now I have a few here because these are going to be what I use to show you how you start it, and then what I'll do is I'll jump to the one that's almost finished and I'll show you how you finish it. As far as how many you're going to need, it depends on the wrist size, but a good starting number is about 100 6mm beads. Now if you're going to do 3 different types of beads, that's approximately 33 beads per color, so or per type of bead. So if you had 3, 100 divided by 3. If you have 2 here, then you're going to need 1/3 of the crystals and 2/3 of the Druks. So around 33 and 66. Again, that's approximate because it does depend on the wrist size and how long that you want to make it. Then of course I have a clasp here. I'm going to be using a tiara cast toggle. I love this one, sort of that bally style. And I'm going to be using a 6-pound fire line. You can use something heavier if you'd like, and then you don't have to do some of the, a little bit of the extra work that I'm going to do here with the 6-pound, which you'll see in a minute. But the reason I like to use 6-pound is because I find that it works for me, and there are just certain parts that I double back through, and I find it's quick and it's easy, and the bracelet doesn't get too stiff. So I'm a fan of the 6-pound personally, and I'm using it in smoke here. Okay, so the way that we're going to start, the clasp will be a little bit later, is I'm going to show you a few rounds of how you get started. And for that, like I said, we're going to be using 2 different types of seed beads here, 15s and 11s. It's up to you whether you use Toho or Miyuki, doesn't really matter here. I'm using Toho, but either one is fine. Now, when you start your bracelet, now I'm working with just a short piece of fire line because I'm just doing a little swatch here, and then we'll move to the one that's finished. But to get this finished length, this was about 2.5 full wingspans. Now it's up to you if you feel like working with that huge long amount in one shot. I find it's easier. I just deal with it, or you can just sort of add on thread halfway through. It's totally up to you. But about 2.5 wingspans will pretty much get you there. Okay. And you're going to want to leave a tail. My tail on here on the sample is a little longer than I need, but you are going to want to leave a tail that's at least around 6 inches or so, because we're going to use that tail back at the beginning side to add 1/2 of your clasp. So it's not just going to be woven in. We're actually going to be utilizing that tail. Because I'm going to be having my crystals swirling throughout the design, I'm going to start with a little ring of beads that's going to be 2 pearls and a crystal. Now, if I was doing just entirely pearls in this design, I would do 3 pearls. You could do all crystals and just do 3 crystals, or you could do 3 different beads. It's up to you, but you're going to have 3 of your 6mm beads. In this case, again, I'm swirling that crystal in, so one of them is the crystal. And I'm going to pick up, I'm going to start with a size 11 seed bead, the larger of my 2 seed beads. I'm going to pick up the first 6mm bead, another seed bead, the next 6mm, another seed bead, and the next 6mm. So what you want to see is all 3 of those 6mm beads picked up, and we have a seed bead in between them, and I'm sorry, I have one too many here. So seed bead, 6mm, seed bead, 6mm, seed bead, 6mm. Okay, let's get that extra one off there. And this is because when we sew them into a loop, they're going to be a continuous circle. So at that point, there will be a seed bead in between each one, as you can see, like that. So I'm going to sew back through all of those beads again. Just like this. And I'm not leaving a particularly long tail here, again, because this is just a little swatch to get you started. And what I like to do before I keep going is I do like to tie my tail and my working thread in a knot. and I do a square knot, right over left, left over right. This just helps things to stay just a little bit tighter for now. Okay, now I'm going to travel through 2 more beads. So that means one of the 6 millimeters and one of the seed beads after it. Sometimes you can get through it in one pass, and sometimes you have to do 2 different passes. This is what we got here, just a little circle of beads, 3 different 6 millimeter beads, or 3 6 millimeter beads, and then an 11 in between each one. Now, the 11 is what's going to be called our cross bead or our intersection bead, and by that I mean when you see the netting and you see all these little X's, you have an 11 sort of right at that intersection or right at that cross. So sometimes people call it a cross bead or an intersection bead. You're going to determine whether you want to work clockwise or counterclockwise. I tend to like to work counterclockwise, so that's when I'm going to hold my beadwork so my thread is pointing out, setting myself up to head in that direction. And I'm going to pick up 4 15s, an 11, and then 4 15s. Now, something I should note is that you can do this design with different sizes. So you don't have to use 6 millimeters. You could do 4 millimeters. You could do 3 millimeters theoretically. This number of beads, however, will change because what you want it to be is the right amount to go right over, fits sort of right over the bead, just like that, kind of rest along the outside. And you don't want to see any thread showing. Okay, that's how you know you have a good amount. Now, if you have to adjust this number based on a different millimeter size, you might have to play with it a little bit, but you want it to be an odd number because you'll notice I have an odd number here. I have 9 beads with that 11 right in the center. Now you can make that 11 in the center the same color or a different color. I think it's easy, especially in the beginning, to use a different color because it's easier to see it as you're doing your rounds, but theoretically you can have that all be the same color as long as it's an odd number, and you'll know where to pick up that middle bead when we need to. So I'm going to pick up that same sequence again, 4 15s, an 11, and then 4 15s. And I'm going to hop over the next bead, which happens to be a crystal, and I'm going to go into the 11 after it. And again, you can see how we're making these little flaps. And I call them flaps because they can kind of flap up or down like that. And these will eventually flap up because this is right here is the bottom of what's the start of a cylinder that's going to build upwards. Okay, we're going to do that one more time. 4 15s, 1 11, 4 15s. I've also seen people do variations where they do all 15s. So they would do maybe a group of 9 15s. Again, that odd number is important. Or you could do 11s, or I've even seen people where they do 15s and a delica in the middle because maybe they just really liked that color. You have options. Okay, now we're going to go into the 11 on the other side of the next bead. And that's what we have there to start. So now before we keep going, we have to do a step up, as we do with many stitches. And the step up is to go through the first half of the first little flap we made, which means we're going to come out of the center bead, that 11. So technically, once we go through that last 11 to tack down that third flap we did, we're going to go into the first 5 beads of the first flap, which means you're coming out of the very center of it, like this. Now you're going to encourage these to sit up like this. And once we do the next step, they will be permanently up there, so you won't have to worry about that. Now the next step is really easy. All we're going to do is plug in 3 more 6 millimeter beads. So if you like this swirl pattern and you want to do that, the way that you'll know when to add in the crystal is you're going to look and see what bead is your thread right above. So in this case, my thread is above a pearl. So that's going to be the next 6 millimeter bead I'm going to pick up. And I'm going to go into the tip of the next wing, or the next little flap. And when you pull it tight, it pulls up that little flap. Now our thread is lined up above the crystal. So that means next we're going to pick up the crystal. We're going to go into the tip of the next little flap. And you can see how this starts that sort of swirl pattern because this one sits above and slightly over from the crystal at the bottom. So now, because we know that only one of them in the top round is going to be a crystal, we know the other one's going to be a pearl. But if you're ever still not sure, again, just where is your thread coming out and look at the bead lined up right below it. It's a pearl. You're going to pick up a pearl. And we're going to go into the size 11 at the tip of the final flap. Now, if you like this technique, you should check back on our channel because I did a video, Filled Tubular Netting beaded bead, and that one was pretty fun, where you sort of made it undulate in and out, and that you made a really pretty beaded bead. So it's the same technique. So if you want to go check that out, those are really, really pretty. Okay, so now we're back to where we started. If you look at this from the top, now again, so disregard what it looks like from the side, that we've added some height. Look at it from the top, and it's that same circle of beads that we started with in the beginning. So we're going to pick up our 4, 1, 4. We're going to go into the next 11 on the other side of the next bead. We get a new little flap. Do the same thing. 4 15s, 1 11, 4 15s. Go through the next one. 4 1 4. Go into the next one. So we've completed our third flap of this new level. Just encourage them to stand upwards. And now is our step up. So again, that is going through the first half of the first flap we made. Actually, I'd already gone into the first bead of that flap without even realizing it when I went through that 11. So just keep going until you're coming out of the tip of that flap, out of the 11. And now we're back to our 6 millimeters again. So again, look where our thread is and what's the bead lined up right underneath it. It's a pearl, so we're going to pick up a pearl. So as I pull it right out of my hands, I'm going to pick up a pearl. So I just went through the 11 that's on top of the crystal. Therefore, now is the time to pick up our crystal. And again, you can see how that swirly pattern is starting. Each one sits higher but just slightly over from the last one. And then now, of course, is the pearl, because only one of them is the crystal in each round. Just like that. And again, if you disregard the height that we've just added, if you look at it from the top, it's that same ring of beads we started with. So you're just alternating those two steps there. And then that's what you get. So all you're going to do is keep repeating these same steps for as long as you'd like to have your bracelet. And now I'm going to show you how we finish up here. So this is what we have here. And again, I really like this design using the Druks. You can use any 6 millimeter beads you want, whether it's crystals, the Druks. You could use Swarovski pearls and the lovely finishes on those. This would be stunning. You could use fire polish. You have a lot of options here. I think the Druks are nice because they make this really cost effective, and around the holidays for giving gifts, I think that's really paramount. But we have just 1/3 of them being the Swarovski crystals, so we still get something that looks beautiful, sparkly, and high-end. Now, I'm going to show you how we finish this up and how we add the clasp. As you can see, I've done it on one side already. So let me just get my needle threaded here. Now, I'm using a size 12 needle, but you can use a 10 if you'd like. I've always just been kind of a fan of 12s. I tend to do a lot of projects where I have to pass through things a lot of times, so I just tend to gravitate towards 12s pretty naturally, but you could certainly use a 10 for this, because you're not having to go back through these 15s a lot. Now, one other thing I want to mention is that with these crystals, and if you've worked with crystals before, you might know that they can sometimes have sharp edges. So what I like to do when I'm doing filled netting that has crystals in it is, after I finish the round where I've plugged in my three 6 millimeter beads, I circle back through it again, just so that way I get a little bit of extra reinforcement there. Now, I could theoretically have just used double fire line, but sometimes I don't love using doubled fire line. I find I get more tangles doing it that way, so I prefer to just double through or go back through this one step every time that you do it, because it's super quick and easy, and then you just get a little bit of extra reinforcement. So now at this point, we're going to do one row of our netting. So again, that's where we pick up the 4, the 1, and the 4. So 4, 1, 4. We're going to go through our next 11 there. We're going to do it again. 4, 1, 4. Now I do want to point out one of the beads here. It was a little wonky. It's a little smaller than the other ones. So I wanted to cull that bead. If you've ever heard of culling your beads, that just means that as you use them, as you go through them, you're just making sure that you're not picking up ones that are a little bit deformed or, you know, anything like that, because that could affect your beadwork. So this is a bead that I will cull off to the side. Okay, and then once more, 4, 1, 4. And just like you would have been doing, you're going to end up doing your step up into the first half of that first flap you made on this round. And again, we're going to encourage them to sit up. We can get them nice and tight like that. Now, normally, if we were just continuing on with our bracelet, we would be plugging in another round of 3 6mm beads, but we're not going to do that here. We're going to taper this down and close this in. That's going to make it easier for us to add a clasp. So this is super duper easy. All I'm going to do is go through those 3 11s, and then I'm going to go through them again. That way they stay nice and tight. So you're going to see how this just pulls in beautifully, because otherwise you have sort of a pretty bulbous end to your bracelet. So this is a nice way to taper it down. See how it starts to pull it in really nicely? It looks very clean, very neat. Beautiful. Now I'm going to circle through those again just to keep them a little tighter. Okay, now we're going to do a beaded loop to attach our clasp. Now, depending on your clasp, will determine how many beads you want in your beaded loop. On this particular toggle, I did a total of 8, and I had to pick up 4, and then I went through the toggle, and then I picked up the other 4. And the reason I had to pick them up like that is because the loop on this toggle won't allow the seed beads to float through it. You could use the 15s for this if you'd like, or you could use the 11s like I did. I liked that the gold kind of, you know, morphed right into the gold of the clasp. But just check to see if your seed beads are going to float through the clasp. If they do, you can just pick them up all at once. But in this case, I had to do half and half. So I'm going to do the same thing at the other side. I'm going to pick up 4 of my 11s, go through my little toggle bar here, and 4 of my 11s. Now, what you're going to do here is we have these 3 beads. What we're going to do is just head right into the next one. And we're going to do some reinforcing here using all 3 that are going to sort of nicely center that loop there. So that's what we get. Little beaded loop there. So now I'm going to go through the next of those 3 11s that were at the top of my netting. And then I'm going to go right up into the 8 seed beads in the toggle bar. And as we pull tight, that's also going to help to nicely center that loop a bit more, since we're not, or since we are putting it on top of a group of 3 versus looping in and out of, say, 2 seed beads or 1 seed bead. Now on my way back down, I'm going to go through the next of those 3 and then loop back up. And it's all just going to get nice and centered, and it's going to get nice and tight, and it's going to look lovely. And it's always important when you're adding on a toggle or clasp of any kind, using a beaded loop or however you're attaching it, you always want to make sure it's nice and reinforced, because this is where all of the stress and the pull is going to be on the bracelet as people take it on and off. So that's really important that it's nice and strong. Okay. Go through, oops, I went through one of my 15s as well accidentally. Here we go. Now just go through the next one, and everything gets nice and centered on the top of your little netted bracelet, and I think it just looks absolutely lovely and neat and clean. Then you'll just weave out your thread, tying some half-hitch knots along the way, and then you have your toggle here. Looks beautiful. It's a really lovely, substantial bracelet. It feels like such a lovely gift to give someone because it's just quite a piece. But again, that trick of using those Druks will keep it nice and cost effective. All right, folks, that wraps it up. Thanks for watching. Make sure to visit us on over at EurekaCrystalBeads.com for everything I used in this video. We're going to link you below to them as well. And hopefully we can satisfy all your beading and jewelry needs. Bye.